Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a deeply chilling, documented account that perfectly shows just how fast a completely normal, mundane situation can spiral into absolute supernatural terror. We're going to unpack a first-hand report from 2019, where what was supposed to be a fun, simple summer vacation job for three brothers warped into a desperate fight for their lives. We're going to break down the entire timeline, the locations, and the escalating manifestations so we can understand exactly what went wrong. No matter where you go, I won't leave you like this. Just sit with that for a second. That is not a line from some Hollywood movie script. That was a direct, very real threat heard echoing from a graveyard by a young man who was simply trying to pack up his bags. It's really the anchor point of the dread that haunted three brothers, Prakash, and Vinod, during their 2019 summer vacation. Okay, let's dive into this and see exactly how they ended up on the receiving end of that terrifying promise. All right, let's get into Section 1. A summer vacation turns dark. The setup here is just so incredibly relatable. You've got the younger brother, Vinod, whose 10th grade summer vacation gets extended. His older brother, Prakash, is planning to visit their eldest brother, who manages a sweet shop in a distant city. Naturally, Vinod begs to tag along, right? The family agrees, figuring it's a great chance for the boys to bond. So they hop on a train, completely unaware of the absolute nightmare waiting for them. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer environmental and psychological contrast. The brothers are coming from a village near Jodhpur, Rajasthan. It's characterized by a large, safe, joint family dynamic. Everyone knows everyone, but they travel to Gudur, a city in Andhra Pradesh, and are instantly plunged into extreme isolation. The streets are totally unfamiliar, they're essentially alone at this isolated sweet shop, and crucially, there is a massive language barrier. They do not speak Telugu. This linguistic and cultural isolation becomes the perfect breeding ground for vulnerability. So they arrive, and takes them to his rented accommodation. It's this massive building with a total of 8 rooms, 4 downstairs, 4 upstairs. But here is the genuinely eerie detail that sets the stage for the whole ordeal. Out of those 8 rooms, only 2 are actually occupied. One by and one by a neighbor named Arvind, who runs a local food stall. The rest of this huge structure is completely hollow, quiet, and totally empty. Moving on to Section 2, the house by the cemetery. You know how in horror stories you often get what I call the boiled frog pacing? You don't get the monster right out of the gate. You get these small, easily dismissed anomalies that slowly turn up the heat until you're literally boiling in terror. Well, that is exactly what starts happening in this empty 8-room building. The very first crack in reality happens to the youngest, Vinod. On his first day there, he's left alone in their locked room for just a few minutes. He takes a shower, gets dressed, and stands in front of the mirror to comb his hair. As he's looking at his reflection, this terrifying human figure appears right behind him in the glass. Vinod is so paralyzed with fear that he just tosses his comb in the air, rips open the door, and sprints all the way to the sweet shop. But of course, like most of us probably would, he desperately tries to brush it off. He tells himself it's just exhaustion from the long train ride. He rationalizes the irrational. But it's almost like the environment itself is hostile. That night, the power goes out. The heat inside the building gets so oppressive that the brothers and their neighbor Arvind decide to drag their beds up to the open rooftop just to breathe. While lying there, Vinod realizes something super unsettling. Just a stone's throw away, directly behind their building, is a cemetery. And literally right after he notices this, a swarm of bats suddenly descends from the trees of that graveyard, aggressively fighting and falling directly onto the brothers. It's this violent, totally chaotic moment that sends them screaming and scrambling right back down into the suffocating heat of their room. The next evening, the psychological terror becomes distinctly physical. Vinod tries to use the common bathroom, but it's locked from the inside. Rationalizes it again, saying, the wooden door just gets jammed when it's wet. But when Prakash and Vinod try to physically force it open, they just freeze. From inside this entirely empty, locked bathroom, a man's voice begins speaking in Telugu. They can't understand the words, but the sheer guttural terror in the tone is absolutely unmistakable. Vinod screams. Comes running out to help, and then the door simply swings open on its own. They stare into an empty bathroom. There's literally no one inside. But as they're standing there in the doorway, an invisible entity brushes right past Vinod and And it wasn't just some cliched cold spot. Vinod experienced the sensation of intense, burning heat, physically radiating from whatever had just walked past them. The shock of it is so severe it causes Vinod's body to literally burn with a sudden, massive fever. Which brings us to Section 3, Fleeing to the New Room. This is the major turning point. Ohm is done brushing things off. He sees his youngest brother burning up with a fever after an encounter with an invisible force, and he realizes they are under direct attack. They have to get out of that 8-room building right away. Look at how fast this transition happens on the timeline here. Day 1, Vinod falls severely ill. By day 2, Ohm is desperately calling his shop owner, Rahim, begging him for a new room. Rahim offers them a vacant apartment closer to the shop. But look at the insane caveat on day 3. The apartment still has belongings inside because the previous tenants, a couple, left for home 2 years ago and simply vanished off the face of the earth. No one ever saw them again. But out of sheer desperation, the brothers move into this missing couple's room anyway. And this perfectly illustrates that you cannot simply outrun a supernatural attachment. While Prakash is back at the old, now completely empty building packing up the very last of their stuff, he steps out onto the balcony. And from the dead silence of the graveyard behind the building, a voice calls out directly to him. No matter where you go, I won't leave you like this. Let's look at Section 4, The Illusions Escalate. The threat was 100% real. Changing locations completely failed to stop the horrifying manifestations. By moving into the apartment of the missing couple, the brothers essentially walked right out of the frying pan and into the fire. The entities knew exactly who they were hunting now. The illusions began compounding rapidly, coming at them in broad daylight and the dead of night. While working the sweet shop counter, Vinod glances over at their old empty building and sees a tall man standing on the roof, just staring directly at him. Later that night, walking back to their new apartment, Vinod and Prakash are stopped dead in their tracks by a disheveled woman standing with her head down, completely blocking their path. But most disturbing of all, Vinod wakes up in the middle of the night to find Ohm sitting at the main door with this eerie, unnatural expression on his face, having a full-blown conversation with thin air. When they confront him the next morning, Ohm has absolutely zero memory of ever leaving his bed. The psychological horror really peaks with an event of sheer, unbelievable trauma. While standing at the shop, Vinod watches a man step out onto the main road, right where their old building stood, and get violently crushed to death by an oncoming bus. Vinod is hysterical. He's shaking. He's pointing it out to Prakash, but Prakash looks at the road and sees absolutely nothing. The traffic is totally normal. There is no body. There's no bus. Only Vinod is trapped in the terrifying projection of this fatal accident. This leads us to our final part, Section 5, The 4 Spirits. That incident completely breaks Vinod. He demands to be sent home to Rajasthan right then and there. Once Vinod arrives back in his village, his terrified family immediately takes him to his uncle, who is a deeply spiritual man, and practices exorcism. And his uncle's diagnosis reveals the horrifying machinery behind everything the brothers experienced in Gudur. So the crucial point is the Hanuman locket. Vinod and Prakash were both wearing these sacred pendants throughout the entire ordeal. The uncle reveals a massive twist here. These lockets were literally the only things keeping the younger brothers alive. The supernatural entities were incredibly powerful, but the lockets restricted them. They couldn't physically possess or harm Vinod and Prakash, so they were forced to cast extreme psychological illusions, like the figure in the mirror and that phantom bus crash, to try and break their minds instead. And the uncle doesn't just find one entity. He identifies 4 specific spirits hunting the brothers in a highly coordinated assault. First, a spirit from the cemetery. Second, a spirit residing in that empty 8-room building. Third, the spirit of a man who actually did die in a bus accident on that exact road, which explains the phantom accident Vinod witnessed. And fourth, the spirit of that man's wife, who tragically committed suicide after his death. Remember the missing couple whose apartment they moved into? Yeah, it was them. By moving, the brothers had unknowingly walked straight into the lair of the other 2 spirits. But the horror wasn't over. While Vinod and Prakash were safely back in Rajasthan protected by their lockets, Ohm was still in Gudur, and Ohm had lost his locket while working. Without that protection, the illusion phase ended entirely. The spirits launched a full, direct physical assault on him. Ohm calls his mother 3 weeks later, his voice barely a whisper. He tells her he's vomiting blood, and that his physical body is rapidly shriveling up. He is literally dying. What follows is basically a breathless modern-day exorcism spanning across state lines. The family gets Ohm on a conference call while he's standing in his sweet shop. The uncle orders Ohm to put the phone on speaker and begins furiously chanting mantras over the cellular connection.
The power of the ritual hits Ohm instantly. He violently collapses right there on the floor of his shop. A neighboring baker literally has to revive him. Following his uncle's screaming orders over the phone, Ohm abandons everything. He locks the shop, gets on the very first train out of Andhra Pradesh, and flees straight to his uncle's house, where the uncle finally performs the physical rituals necessary to sever the attachment and officially bind all 4 spirits to a tree.
Ohm survived and slowly regained his health, but he never returned to Andhra Pradesh. That sweet shop in Gudur remains permanently closed to this day, just rotting away. But it leaves us with a lingering, deeply unsettling question. The brothers escaped, but those spirits are tied to that specific location. So what still waits inside that empty 8-room building by the cemetery? What happens to the next person who decides to rent a room there, completely unaware of the terrifying entities sharing their walls? Keep that in the back of your mind next time you travel somewhere new. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. And as always, keep questioning the world around you.